Welcome to Fleet Safety Geeks. I'm Bob.
And I'm Phil, and we welcome you to our podcast.
All right, welcome back to another week of Fleet Safety Geeks. We are finishing our Fleet Safety Policy series. This is episode 3 where we're talking about implementing the Fleet Safety Policy. We have special guest Mike Camnetar, Fleet Services Manager for General Mills, and he's also on the board of directors at NAFA and serves as Vice President of NAFA Board. Mike, how are you? Would you like to say a few words?
Good to see you guys. It's always good to see you guys after we've been apart for so long. But no, doing really well. And I'm super excited to join you guys today.
Yeah, this is going to be an important one because we're going to kind of tie everything together. And we all have experience doing that, but we wanted to get somebody who also has experience doing that. So appreciate you being on. Phil, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Yeah.
Good.
So, go ahead.
No, I just this is as you said, the last of the 3 on fleet policy, and I think this one is this puts a ribbon on it, right? I mean, so we're going to talk about implementing the policy and then really like enforcement of it and an equal enforcement of it once it is implemented and things like that. So I think this is a really important episode.
Yeah. So okay, well, great. So to summarize the other episodes, we talked about developing a fleet steering committee or a safety committee and getting all your stakeholders involved. Making sure you have C-level support and everybody can back and implementing a safety policy. The second week we talked about actually developing something as a scoring system. Phil, you talked about having an enforcement and holding people accountable. So that's an important part. But then, Mike, that's when it comes to you. So, as we implement a policy, you've probably had some experience doing this. How do you feel as far as, I assume you've taken those steps as well or done something similar. How have you implemented a safety policy in your experience?
Yeah, I'm on the cusp of revising ours today at General Mills. But actually, the first piece is to essentially make sure you get buy-in from everybody. I mean, so I've socialized what our safety policy with everyone in our organization, explained why, because some people had questions or, does that seems pretty rash or pretty hardcore, et cetera. But I explained to them this is the scenario we're trying to prevent. And at the end of the day, I think all of us who are fleet managers, we have a duty to protect our organization from a liability standpoint in not allowing, drivers who shouldn't be behind the wheel on a day-to-day basis. So the first piece is just really just getting buy-in from everybody and getting everybody on the same page. One of the things you don't want to do is not get buy-in and you roll it out and everybody's, well, I don't agree with that, So everyone in our organizations agreed with it because when it comes time to enforce it, and there's going to be a time when we have to, say goodbye to one of our drivers, for example, there's nobody complaining about the policy or the process. It is what it is at that point. And you want to make sure we treat everybody equally, within the organization, and we kind of, the same consequences are also delivered, based on the behaviors of those individuals. So the first part, I think, is just getting buy-in. The second part is communicating it. And that gets really tough because you can send folks emails. And so we're doing a couple of things. We're sending emails to all of the drivers just to say, hey guys, here's our new fleet safety policy, effective on such and such date. We're putting out there on our FMC portal, so our drivers have access to it. We actually also have an internal, kind of a intranet type thing internal to the company. So we actually have a policy site where all of our policies are listed internally. So we're updating it there as well. And then we're going to actually do a little bit of over the next several weeks, we're going to start pushing out little just quick emails. Did you know the policy changed? Here's the link to it, and here's a couple things that you might want to be aware of. And just to kind of sprinkle, because if you just send somebody the policy, the people are going to be like, oh my gosh, it's 17 pages. I think mine's like 17, which I tried to limit it down, but there's just so much ground to cover. And there's so many scenarios, and I often have a conversation with some of my superiors about, when certain situations arise, they say, well, what does the policy say? And I say, guys, it is really difficult for me to have a policy that addresses every single what if scenario. So we have to kind of stay broad, and then we use our judgment, when some of these events come into place. But I really think the key is just communicating to everybody so they're aware. If you send them a whole 17-page policy, some people will read it just like everything in life, right? Some people are going to read it cover to cover. Other people are going to go, delete. They're not going to read it. And then when they're impacted by it, they're going to go, wait, this isn't fair. I didn't know I couldn't have 3 wrecks in a year. Nobody told me, like that's, and I'm sure you guys have been in those situations, as well. Or, well, I didn't know talking on my cell phone was against policy. And it's all very clear out there of what the expectation is. So it's just making sure there's clarity in what in what we're communicating. So that's really the key, I think, to implementing it. And then once you get it in place, it's also making sure you follow it consistently, because one of the things that could really kind of sink a fleet manager is when you start allowing exceptions for this or allowing exceptions for that. If you're allowing that many exceptions, you might want to look at revising the policy, because it should apply to everybody. And unless it's a very extreme circumstance that you come across, and of course we all get those from time to time, but unless it's very extreme, you really can't. You really can't provide exceptions to folks, because then you just become an exception manager the whole time. So,
Yeah. Phil, were you going to say something?
No, go ahead, Bob.
Well, I just want to piggyback on some of what you just said there, Mike, because it's a really good point. We've brought it up on a couple different episodes before this one, and that's drivers are looking to follow policy. So once you've identified that policy and explained it to them, they're almost at a relief, because then they know what's expected of them. So training that policy from either the field managers down to the drivers is very important. Communicating it, but also making sure that the drivers fully understand what's going on is a good step there. So that's great. And then you mentioned you can't put everything in the policy. That's what I'm dealing with right now. Is we have a driver who was involved in an accident. We're getting sued, and there was the driver said to the other attorney, I think I had a dash cam in there, and maybe that'll give something. We don't have a dash cam policy. It wasn't a dash cam from the company. We didn't have any video from it. And so I said, hey, we shouldn't have dash cams in the vehicle. And everybody's like, where is that in the policy? And again, you can't have everything in the policy, but that's probably going to be added until we have a dash cam, policy in place. So yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, those are things that just pop up. I ran into a similar scenario as well, where we had a driver who was involved in an altercation, and he said, oh, I have a dash cam in my car. I can send you a video of the whole thing. And I was like, okay, interesting. But you're right. I mean, and there's technologies like that we're, as fleet managers, we're not aware what drivers are bringing into the vehicles, and so forth. So it always, another thing as we talk about policy is that you have to update the thing quite frequently just to keep up with the changing technology and the times and everything else. And one thing I do want to add to what I was saying before, Bob, is what another key component is just visibility to it. Like, so one of the things that was not happening in our organization is we ran their MVRs and we could see it, but the drivers actually couldn't see their points. So nobody actually knew where they stood. And so one of the important things that we just did was we gave everybody access to see where they stand. So if you can only have X amount of points, this is where you are today. Because our goal with those enforcement and that policy is to try to change those drivers' behaviors. I don't want to pull somebody off the program when they get too many points. I want them to be aware that when you have this many points, something needs to change, because if you don't change, you're going to be off the program. And as we all know, some drivers take that change very seriously, and they're like, "Yep, I need to do better." And other drivers, it's the ones that say, "Well, that wasn't my fault, and that wasn't my fault, and I didn't do anything wrong." And of course, they're not going to change, and it's only a matter of time before some of those drivers will accumulate enough points to where they won't be on the program anymore.
Or they're going to have a serious accident that's going to hurt somebody or themselves. Right.
Yep.
Right.
You make a number of good points, Mike. I love that. What you're saying is that you have to keep the policy updated. It has to be a living document. And I worked for a pharmaceutical for a number of years where we went through the same thing. And what I found also when you do the policy update, you even get that upper level buy-in, upper level management level buy-in. I did just here are the changes. I had to do the short version of here. Okay, so that you didn't have to read through the entire thing again, or it would never have happened. And I'm not trying to be critical, but they're very, very busy people, and you have to do a pretty quick assessment or quick version of what you're proposing as changes. But it has to be looked at least on an annual basis, I say. And to the point that both Mike and Bob, both of you made, you can't cover everything. I put in a lot of generals, for instance, you can't put any equipment in the vehicle or on the vehicle that is not already in there when you receive the vehicle,
Mm-hmm.
And so I just put a general thing like that in there just to kind of cover myself. But I'm thinking back on the wording of that, and I'm wondering, is that covered? Cameras, who would have thought they had to put in there, hey, don't put a dash cam in, But you never know what the drivers are going to do. So you got to kind of predict. But another thing I found very, very helpful is I had legal on speed dial. I mean, it was legal on HR, because when it came down to that policy enforcement, I needed them, to be there with me. And Mike, and I don't know if you've ever, encountered that, but you get that really good employee that they don't want their policy to quite apply to that person, and that can be difficult. So I don't know if you've ever encountered those things, Mike, and then how do you navigate through things like that?
Well, so I've encountered that several times. I mean, it's a typical salesperson, right? You have a really good salesperson in an organization. They're a rock star. They sell. They're good. But sometimes a good salesperson, they're super aggressive and they drive super aggressive. I mean, that's kind of the personality traits that you see. And so what I have to often remind folks is that, yes, they're a great salesperson, but part of the overall job is driving. So if they're good at one piece, they're not so good at the other piece. And so, yeah, they might be a good employee through this lens, but you've got to look at the whole picture. So, and in some cases, I've even had to show the dollar amounts that a certain employee was costing us doing what that person was doing, and then compared it to their sales and said, you know what? Yeah, this guy is a rock star, but he's not even making enough money to cover what he's smashing up. And the damage he's causing to other people, and then when you start including the liability claims and the injuries to other parties, and man, most fleets are self-insured, so I mean they're taking that on dollar for dollar in their organization, and a lot of people don't look at it that way. But you've got to look at the whole cost. It's not just the sheet metal of the fleet vehicle that you own. What are we paying to the other party? How much downtime, loss of work, all that stuff kind of goes. But yeah, I try to say that again, Phil, it's you have a whole job to do, and especially some of these salespeople who drive a lot. Some of them will drive 4 or 5 hours a day, so they're spending a majority of their time driving. So they've got to get that component of their job right in order to be considered a really good employee.
Yep, I totally agree with it. I always tell people, hey, whether you like it or not, you're a professional driver. If you have to drive from point A to point B to get your job done, guess what? You fall into that classification. You need to drive professionally. So I always tell people, hey, that is a huge part of what you do every day, and it's the most dangerous thing you do. And I've related this story before, and Bob, if I'm telling the same stories over again, I apologize, but I remember doing training for a company. It was a copper mining company, and they determined that it was much more dangerous for their drivers to drive to the mine than it was to work in the mine. So they have to understand that their risk factors are so much so high just behind the wheel. And my previous employment, with the police job, that is one of the most dangerous things cops do. They always think about all the shootings and things like that. A lot of cops die in car wrecks. And so people need to understand that is a major part. You bring up such a great point. That is a major part of their employment, and they need to be just as serious about that as they are with their sales. They need to give that as much attention. But what I found too, Mike, is that they're not type A's, they're type triple A's, right? They're the
Yep.
people who are out there really getting it, right? And they want to get that other sale, and they want to do this and want to do that. But if you can swing that person towards safety, if you can convince them, this is very, very important. And the most important thing you do every day, I say it over and over again, is you go home. And Bob, what do we say? Don't be a
Selfish driver.
selfish driver, right? Get home, right?
Yeah, it was
Like,
really interesting, Phil. When I was in a sales role, I visited a prospect who fixed cell phone towers, and in fact, and so their technicians had to climb 200 feet in the air up a cell phone tower on a windy day. Sometime it's raining, etc. And so they were like, the people that are comfortable doing that are comfortable taking a lot of risk. And how does the risk that they're comfortable
Right.
taking translate to their driving? And so that organization had a really tight telematics policy on their cars because their employees, I mean, if you think about the kind of person I'm not climbing up a cell phone tower. Like, there's no way in heck. I mean, I'd like, sorry, I don't care how much you're paying me, but I'm not going up there. But, but it translates, sometimes the jobs that we expect people to do translates into certain personality types. And so this company had to like really keep they were on the like real time alert system with those drivers just to keep them in line, because they're willing to take. I mean, if you're willing to climb up there and fix a cell tower during lightning, a storm, or something like that, I mean, you may not worry about speed limits and safe clearances and things like that.
So what I learned though, Mike, is that if you can take that person, the really aggressive person, and get them enthusiastic about safety, you now have that type like AAA person promoting safety, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. For
So
sure.
if you can do that, if you can swing that, because hey, I think we can all agree we don't want to see people lose their jobs.
No.
But what I had to learn was I didn't do it. You did. You knew the policy. You violated the policy, and again, and now you're unemployed, and that stinks. But they're written for a reason.
Yeah, so for the risky employees who climb cell towers and work on them in high winds, and that translates over to maybe taking risks in a vehicle. That company sounds like they were very, had a great safety culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not only just with telematics in there and making a very tight program, but they probably also had very good safety training on the towers and stuff like that. So if you have that really good safety culture around the job that they do, hopefully they were also doing a lot of training and keeping the driver safe behind the wheel, and it was carrying over into the wheel. With your policy, Mike, you talk about having it out there, visibility, access to. Do you do any kind of training, like any internal training? We have like a university that we do, and we have a sign off. Do you have them sign off on it?
Yep.
And agree
So
to it?
when a new employee that comes into to the fleet world, if you are a fleet eligible employee, we actually make you read the policy. There's a sign off, and then there's a quiz at the end. And I think some people get a little upset with us because we make them get 100% on the quiz, or they got to take it again. But it's not hard. It's basic things like, is it okay to be driving driving while talking on your cell phone? Is it okay to be checking your text messages while you're at a stoplight? Like, it's kind of some of those. It's not something that you have to memorize. It's kind of more common sense stuff. But we use those quizzes just to remind people of what our policies are and so forth. And then every time somebody orders a new vehicle, we actually make them re-sign off on the policy again. So, so it's not just on the initial right when they come on board. Because if you think about it, any of us who have changed jobs, you get there on the first day and they're like, here's this policy, here's our anti-corruption policy. And you're like, yeah, okay. One can't possibly, even if you read it, you're not going to retain all that information, right? I mean, it's a lot. So companies tend to do that. we actually wait 5 days after they're on board to send them that. And I did that intentionally so that it's not going to be part of their typical onboarding stuff that gets thrown at you. So I don't know how effective that is, but it is something that I took note when I was a new employee several years ago, and I was like, oh my God, I literally spent like the first 2 days doing nothing but like video just in training and signing this and acknowledging that. And I don't even remember what half that stuff was. So I shouldn't probably say that because people say, oh, Mike didn't remember that. But we're all human, right? I mean, that's, so anyway, so we did space that out a little bit. Again, don't know how impactful it is, but I just want to be kind of just aware of that overload that happens when a new employee comes on board. So.
Yeah. That's a great idea. And I was going to ask you, do you kind of refresh the policy and the agreement to the policy? I really like the idea because they're going to get a new car every 3 to 5 years, or in this environment, every 20 years, if we can ever get a car ordered. but that's a great opportunity to refresh that policy with the driver. But that's also another good point, when you're getting onboarded with a new company and you have all of this stuff thrown at you, and then you've been there 15 years and they hold you to some policy that you read on day one 15 years ago. It's not going to do you a lot of good.
Right.
You got to keep that stuff fresh and renew it with people so they understand.
And there's other policies that organizations have that they refresh every year or two, like that they make you take training on. If you think like
Ethics.
Workplace violence, ethics, some of those things work because they're important. And the ones that are important also, when you don't follow them, the consequences are pretty severe. And so that's why, it's a good idea to just have that refresher every so often, just to remind folks of, there are things that we expect you to do and not do, when you're behind the wheel of our vehicle.
Yeah, the consequences of not being safe behind the wheel can be extremely severe. That's why we're here doing this. So, yep, exactly. So, well, great points. I like that. That's good. Phil, you got anything about refreshing policy? You've done this before.
So I just wanted to relate this story. This was a number of years ago. And I won't name the company. I'll just say it was a Fortune 500. Okay, I was in a fleet meeting, and the fleet manager was doing a presentation for the group and talking about policy and running MVRs. And he said that he does not run MVRs because there was a certain senior vice president in his organization who refused to have his own MVR run. Now, wouldn't you like to have seen that MVR?
Yeah.
And he said as a result, he removed that from the policy. So Bob and Mike, you both made the point of you need to get that upper level management, the buy-in from top down, the C level. That's, if you got the president of the company signing off and saying, okay, this is what we're doing, then when you have that person, I think you're going to get a lot less pushback and actually protect yourself a little bit from somebody who is, at a higher level than you are. But it's unfortunate that you have to think in those terms, but sometimes you have to think in those terms. So that's why I believe it's so important that you get the most senior management buy-in when you're putting your policy in place, so that you don't run into a situation like that. I just remember leaning over and sitting the guy I was with and just saying, hey, if any of their drivers ever hit me and I'm not able to, make sure you tell my wife to sue that company, because they're not even running MVRs because of one senior VP who refused to have his MVR run.
And that makes the situation even worse because it's not a line level employee. This is a senior person, that obviously has means and, and so forth. And that really speaks to the culture of an organization when something like that happens. And to your point, Phil, if there is litigation on something like that, it typically won't end very favorably to that organization. If you are making exceptions, for certain employees. It even looks worse if you're making exceptions for higher level employees. Those are the ones who should be setting the example, and that's what would come out in a courtroom as well. And I wouldn't want to be on the stand having to answer that question.
Nope. And again, that's where I think it's important to make sure you have legal and HR on your side as well. You have to have the policy in place. The policy has to have some teeth and has to be followed for everybody. So, but the point I'm trying to make, though, is make sure you do have that, the absolute tops of the company signing off on this and agreeing on this, because I don't care who it is. I don't care who it is. The policy has to be enforced at all levels. I don't care if it's the newest person coming in or the person that's been there for 25 years and is a top office in the building. Doesn't matter. Does not matter.
Yeah.
It has to be enforced.
Yeah, one of the things that we do as part of our safety program is we send out safety blasts. Fleet sends one week. Health and safety sends trips, falls, and not getting hurt on your everyday job inside a building. The following week, when it goes out, we send it to all global employees. So it goes overseas, and we try and globalize it so it fits with everybody's type of driving and where they are. And every once in a while, we'll get a pushback because it comes from our generic, fleet inbox. And so somebody replies to it thinking nobody's answering it. And they're really rude and saying, I've been driving for 35 years. I'm not even in a fleet vehicle. Stop sending me this. Your unsubscribe doesn't even work. And I'm like, this is sent by corporate communications. Unsubscribe isn't going to work because we're going to send this to you every week. But this is also supported by our president and CEO of the company. And as a safety a company with such a strong safety culture, we just wanted everybody to be safe. We're doing this for you, So I try and throw it back on them, but that's exactly right. If you have that senior buy-in leadership, you can actually use it, to your benefit and talk to other drivers and explain why we're doing some of the things that we do. So,
and a lot of people can use that in their personal cars as well. A lot of the information that all of us send out are not just something you should be doing at work. It's something we should all be doing in our daily, as we drive to the grocery store, errands, whatever. We should be following those same best practices and safety, safety parameters, even when we're in our own car. I mean, it's common sense. I hate to say it, but a lot of it is purely common sense.
Sometimes that's not very common, though, Mike.
I know.
Yeah, that's exactly what the president of our company said when he saw the messages that were going out to the drivers. He's like, why aren't we sending this to every employee? And so we adjusted how we did that. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. So we try and keep these to about 30 minutes. I don't want to take anything away from the value of the podcast. Mike, do you have anything you want to kind of, summarize, or, do you think that you've caught most of what you wanted to say as far as implementing the policy? Any last tidbits?
Just, don't give up. I mean, I know sometimes implementing these things can be hard, but, it was interesting when I interviewed for the role that I'm in. The director who was interviewing me, his last question was, Mike, if you're in a situation where you have a choice of doing the easy thing or the right thing, what would you do? And, of course, you guys probably know how I responded to that, but sometimes doing this is not easy, but you've always got to do the right thing, and you've got to put in the extra work. And somebody might say, well, why are we even addressing that? You know what? It's the right thing to do. This could cost us a lot of money. So it's not easy work, but most fleet managers never really back away from a challenge anyway. I mean, all of us are problem solvers by nature. And so, that's, keep at it. And if it's something that you can't get in this year, keep bringing it up. Keep bringing it up. Keep putting it on the table until you're successful in getting that, or maybe reposition how you're approaching a certain policy that you're trying to put into, or show examples. But at the end of the day, don't give up.
Yeah, I like that. That's a great message. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, Phil, you have any last tidbits of knowledge that people can use?
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate your insight here. It's been excellent. I just like that. Don't give up, right? I will encourage people to watch the next episode, Bob. We have a good one coming up. So
why don't you give a quick preview?
Well, we're going to be angry. Okay, so let's just listen.
Angry safety geeks.
Yeah, the angry safety geeks, right? So it's really ridiculous what's going on the roads, and everybody who drives knows what I'm talking about. I mean, the numbers are through the roof, and I just think as a nation here in the U.S., it's just not being addressed the way it should be addressed. So that's kind of where we're going with it. Bob and I will be on our soapboxes and shouting. So if you want to see an angry Bob and an angry Phil, tune in for the next episode. This was a much kinder, nicer podcast today, Mike. Thanks to you, we appreciate it, and thank you for the information. And I hope people that get some good ideas in how to handle things within their own organizations.
Yeah, Mike, thank you. This was
Yeah.
very valuable, and it was a great way to kind of tie up the 3-part series here on developing a fleet safety policy. Your feedback was very helpful. I appreciate that.
Thanks. I appreciate the invite. Enjoyed it as well. So,
Yeah. But Phil, to your point too, we are going to get a little bit angry next week, mainly because, crashes are up, fatalities are up. And the reason Phil and I are out here is because we hate crashes. Phil says it all the time. We want to reduce those crashes. We concentrate on the fleet industry because we're in the fleet industry, but this podcast is for everybody. Not all fleet drivers are the ones involved in accidents. Everybody's involved. Phil and I were talking. I just came back from vacation, and it was an 8-hour drive. We got run off the road by somebody, probably using a cell phone. We saw so many vehicles, swerving between their lanes, going slow. We have a problem out there, and we need to fix it. And Phil and I aren't going to be the ones to fix it, but we're going to try our damnedest.
Start making some noise. Something has to be done.
Yeah. So with that, in respect to everybody's time, we want to thank you for listening to this podcast. Hope you have found this series to be helpful and beneficial for your organization. If you're listening on a popular podcast platform such as Spotify, Apple, or Google, please subscribe and be notified of future episodes. You can also find our video podcast on YouTube at Fleet Safety Geeks. We'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe there as well. And you may not know it, but we're on the other social media channels as Facebook and Twitter, where we'll put all of our episode links to our episodes out there, and some also helpful safety information. Finally, if you have a suggestion for a fleet safety topic, please reach out to me or Phil by email if you have it, or on LinkedIn. And most importantly, drive safe out there and keep your drivers safe. With that, I want to thank you for both of you for this episode. And Mike, thanks for tying this one together.
thanks, guys.